I think this is a really important session, actually. We're talking about reaching the left behind. It's what I alluded to earlier. We really do have to have a way of speaking to people who are so difficult to reach, and I'm hoping that this panel will be able to shed some light on it. I know some of these guys have done amazing work. So I'll introduce our chair for this session, who is Kamran Hussain.
We're now going to move straight to the speeches. I've got Femi going first.
Hi, everybody. So, it's no coincidence that the parts of the country that voted strongest to leave the EU are the parts that are the most deprived. I mean, it's even been said, I'm not sure if this is true or not, so don't quote me on it, but you can actually trace the line of Leave Remain as to where there are pret-a-mangers. So the fact is, the people that have been left behind, people that Westminster has never cared about, wanted things to change. And they never believed what was termed Project Fear, because politicians have told them, this will make you richer, this will make you poorer, for decades. And it's never gotten better for them. If you look at places like Sunderland, for example, Westminster has never cared about places like Sunderland. The attitude that Westminster has had towards Sunderland is, oh, you've got a Nissan factory, that's your lot. Working in a factory or being in a call center, that's the limit for you people. That's the attitude. Because when you ask somebody who's been to uni, a top uni, where do they end up? London. Where are the opportunities? Where's the infrastructure? Where are the jobs? London. Westminster has not cared about those places, and they voted Brexit because they were told this was a way to shake things up. They were told that this was a way that they could finally actually be heard, listened to, and there might actually be some investment in their area. Because again, they did not trust Project Fear because politicians have lied to them about the way to make things better for a very long time. So the question is, are they getting what they wanted? Almost every impact assessment says that the places that voted strongest to leave, places that were most deprived, would be the worst hit. Because quite simply, the moment that you tighten the purse strings of Westminster, they're not going to suddenly start caring about Sunderland or Darlington or Hull. That's not the way they operate. If the fact is, for things to actually get fixed in those areas, that requires a complete change in the way that we do politics in this country. Now, I mean, again, take Sunderland. That's a strong Labour seat. Never going to change, never has changed. But that has the added problem of, well, Labour has no political incentive to actually invest in that area because it's a safe seat. The Tories have no political incentive to invest in that area because they're never going to win there. The tragedy is they're the ones who are most likely to be hit by this. Sunderland, 27,000 jobs rely on the Nissan factory that's in Sunderland. That's across the northeast. There are 7,000 jobs that are tied specifically to that factory within Sunderland. Now, 75% of the cars that are made in that factory go to mainland Europe. The reason why that factory is based there is because being in the single market means that any product that is made in this country legally is automatically legal without tariffs, without regulatory checks across Europe. So it would not make sense to keep that factory here if the majority of the cars that it actually makes go to a completely different legal jurisdiction with a tariff barrier, with a regulatory barrier between. So their jobs are the worst off. Now the fact is, that should make every single one of us deeply angry with respect to that place because they voted for Brexit, hoping for things to get better. They were told by the tabloid press that Brexit was a way to make things get better. You should not be angry at Brexit voters. You should be angry for them. That's the point. Because, like I said, they don't trust Project Fear. They don't trust politicians. But, I mean, the reason why I got involved is precisely because, having studied EU law, I saw that David Cameron wasn't explaining the basics. We are talking about 5 months where he was telling us that the single market was necessary for British jobs and British prosperity, without never once explaining what the single market is. Now, it is a system, I mean, I often say, like I said, you have to explain it in terms that everybody can agree with, that there's no issue of this might be fake news or anything like that. Just break it down. You're a beer producer. You want to sell to 28 different countries, including your own. But those different countries have different rules. you'd have to manufacture, market, and package your product in 28 different ways. That sends your costs through the roof, and it means your profit margins will go in the toilet. So the EU says we'll make one rule, and you need to only follow one rule for your product to be legal across the whole of the EU. Or, if the EU hasn't made a rule, then as long as your product meets the rules of your home country, the UK, it's legal everywhere. In both cases, you can make a single version of your product, and it will be as if you were selling it to the next door neighbor when you're actually selling it to Bulgaria. That means supermarket prices will go down. That's good for everybody. I just explained the single market in 30 seconds. He had 5 months. And the fact is, I mean, I've been speaking to people in the Northeast and the places that have been left behind. They do not want to be any poorer. Every tabloid press that says that they were okay with being made poor at the altar of Brexit, they are lying to you. And you should be deeply offended by that, because they took people that have been completely crapped on by the establishment for decades and promised a better life. And they're now saying that they wanted their lives to be worse. Be angry for Brexit voters, the people that have actually been left behind.
Thank you very much, Femi. Could I please ask Jude to speak next?
Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here. I came south to talk about the north. I came down this morning from Northumberland, but I'm originally from Teesside, and I represent Sunderland and those voters in Sunderland, and I've had thousands of doorstep conversations with voters from across the northeast about Europe over many years now, and I thought I would give you a little bit of what I took from those conversations, but also a bit of perspective, if we are to stop Brexit, how we re-engage with those voters actively. So what I heard on the doorsteps of the northeast, in places like Sunderland, in Middlesbrough, in the mining and the pit villages across County Durham, were 4 main things, I think. The first was, we're too far away from where decisions are made. There's a perception, particularly in the northeast, that there are decisions which are made in Holyrood and there are decisions which are made in Westminster, but nobody really cares about us. And even all of the talk of the Northern Powerhouse is actually about the M62 corridor. Those who are above the M62 corridor somehow are perceived to live amongst the fields with the sheep in some kind of uncivilized rabble region of heathens and border reivers. And the concern is that really, where are the decisions being taken which affect our everyday life? That in the context that we as a region in the northeast have been the region, along with the East Midlands, the hardest hit by austerity measures in terms of local government cuts. Our dependence on public sector work as a result of mass deindustrialisation means that those austerity measures have hit deeper and harder in our communities than necessarily elsewhere in the country. That on top of the fact that we're one of the poorest places in Britain, in certainly one of the poorest regions in England, meant that we were very dependent on our EU membership in terms of funding and in terms of investment. We get, as has been the rule, a much better deal from Europe than we do from Westminster, partly because the decisions are made on the basis of the proportion of average GDP, a completely cold analysis, rather than any kind of political game playing about the level of population or where seats need to be won or lost in the country. So we definitely got a better deal. But what was interesting was the TUC did some analysis across actually this region, across South Yorkshire, in mining pit villages around Barnsley, talking about why people voted leave. And one of the really striking things from those conversations that in the union movement they had with workers in the workplaces they represent was that people really rejected the idea that we benefit more from the EU than outside, because it created a sense that we are dependent, that we're poor and we're neglected, and therefore we're at the bottom of the pile. And whatever you say about the North, we are very, very proud people. We're proud of our communities and we're proud of what we've come through, and particularly if you come from an area like Teesside where we've seen the steel industry. I think your CV of me is slightly out of date. We fought to save the steel industry on Redcar a few years ago, but we lost it after the first fight, we lost it in the second fight. But people are proud of that industrial legacy. It's a fundamental part of identity. And the idea that because of industrialisation, a decision made in multinational head offices and in Westminster, we were then dependent on EU funds to fund our regional support, was perceived as a negative by many voters in those communities because they don't want to be dependent. They're resilient, proud people. And if we're going to respond to that leave vote from people who feel like they're left behind, we have to understand that psychological dimension of Brexit, and we have to show that we value those communities. We value the values on which our communities are formed, and we're keen to force investment and to channel investment into all the communities, not just the big cities, not just Newcastle Gateshead, but also the small pit villages, the coal mining areas across the region and small towns, and particularly the coast. Very few people talk about the impact in terms of the coast. So the first thing was that call for take back control really rang straight through to voters because they felt that control was somewhere way further away from them. And the instability that people feel and the insecurity that people feel feeds into that. So the North East is the 0 hours capital, if you like, of the country. We have extremely high levels of economic insecurity, the highest levels of food bank usage in terms of population. The most used food bank in the country is in the West End of Newcastle, for example. And that level of economic insecurity also take back control spoke to people in that context. So it was a combination of all these factors. But then you add in 40 years of Euro myths, politicians in London blaming Brussels for things, the tabloids adding lie on lie on lie, and it's a very, very toxic mix. And there's also a north-south divide in some of this. I had a conversation in the local elections ahead of the referendum in Middlesbrough, where we had an open debate on the street between a husband and wife, where the wife said, I never vote in anything. I'm not voting in the local elections, but I'm voting in the big one, in that referendum. I'm definitely voting in that, and I'm voting to leave. And the husband said, but we live in an area which depends on exports. Teesport depends on the relationship with Rotterdam. Absolutely fundamental economic link. And she said, yeah, but you know, they're saying that if we leave, the refugee camps will move. At that time, the jungle was right top news in all of the tabloids. The refugee camps will move from Calais to Dover, and then the southeast will understand what it's like. That's what she said on the doorsteps. There was a level where there was a perception of, if we use this vote to kick back, we will be heard, and then somebody will have to do something. This is our opportunity to make our voice heard. And I think we have to recognise that we have to respond to that voice. So I thought, I don't want to waffle on for too long, but I thought one of the interesting things was to maybe give you a perspective from two very different levels, if you like. On a local level, it means community engagement. It means massive emphasis in terms of getting back in, talking to people, organising things, and getting into communities and supporting people, and understanding that that's actually what part of the Brexit call was about. It was about a sense that that wasn't being done. And on the other side, at the EU side, there also has to be change. There also has to be a response to some of the concerns, the legitimate concerns that people were raising. We have examples across the country. There was a big strike on Teesside of construction workers where, and they blockaded the whole of Teesside, the Wilton Industrial, the former ICI site, where there was a very real case of posted workers, which is workers who are sent from one country to another country to perform a service, being posted onto Teesside to build a big new energy facility. And those workers were not paid the right rate for the job. They were paid under the national agreement for the construction sector. And people were very angry about the lack of fairness in EU rules. And one of the interesting things in Brussels is that I think that actually the EU institutions post the referendum have been far more responsive in some ways to the concerns of the Leave voters on Teesside than our government has been in Westminster. Because what we've seen in the last 2 years is a massive de-blocking of social legislation. I've worked for nearly 20 years now on European employment rights and on European industrial policy and legislation. And for 10 years, it was an uphill fight for every single bit of health and safety legislation, for every single legal case in an employment tribunal to try and get people fairness at work. In the last 2 years, we've seen 4 or 5 big pieces of legislation come through the European Parliament that myself and Julie and our colleagues have voted on. And that is a response to the Brexit vote in this region. Politicians in Europe recognised that there had to be a social dimension to the European Union, because not only do people want their communities and their values to be recognised here and the investment to come into communities, but they want those values to be represented in the European project. So the social part of the European project is part of dealing with those responses from Leave voters. Last point, I promise, Mike, I've left you some minutes.
Don't worry.
The last point is the irony. I employ a French member of staff who leads on international trade for me, and he said to me, you know, the irony is that most people in France have no idea what the customs union is or the single market, or even after Femi's videos, they haven't gone viral yet, I don't think, in Dijon and Lyon. The reality is, and the very ironic tragedy, is if we leave, we will be the most educated citizens in the European Union about how the European Union works. But if we stay, we can use that education to push forward a proper European project, which is a project about people, and reconnects to those communities that I represent, that Julie represents in the Northwest, that Richard represents across Yorkshire and Humber. That's a European project which would be based on a long-term sustainable future. We have to really connect these dots. They're not divided, and the challenge is to take our experience from Brexit and feed that into the future of the European project. Hopefully we will be in that project, but even if we're not, we should be feeding it closely from the outside for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jude. I'll hand it over to Mike.
Right, hello everybody. So I just want to start by telling you a couple of anecdotes from the last week. So on Wednesday, I was in Stocksbridge doing a Brexitometer, which, if you don't know what that is, it's just asking people a few very simple questions, which are, how do you think Brexit's going? What do you think it means for jobs? What do you think it means for the NHS? Should we have a second referendum? And we obviously live in a world where we are aware of what's going on with Brexit, and we're very concerned about it. We understand the implications for jobs and the NHS and, you know, the things that actually really matter in all of our lives. And it struck me, and it struck me before, but it struck me again that that information isn't filtering through to a lot of people. A lot of people seem to have a general sense that Brexit wasn't going very well, but a lot of people were just confused when we said, well, what does it mean for jobs? Or we had a lot of, well, I don't know, or a lot of, oh, I think we're going to get more jobs, aren't we? And same for the NHS. And it just struck me again that we need to do more in terms of getting our messaging out and helping people understand the implications for the things that matter to them on a daily basis. Second anecdote, I was speaking this week to a car worker in Birmingham who works in a car manufacturing factory. And he's a passionate Remainer, Labour Party member, trade unionist. And he said to me, I was the only person in my car factory who voted Remain in 2016. And when I spoke to people about it, they were angry and they told me to shut up with the propaganda. Over 2 years on, he said the situation is exactly the same. He still talks to people. They still tell him to shut up. in his opinion, they would all vote leave again, even though he is very aware that this is existential for his industry. He knows that if Brexit goes ahead, especially if it's no deal, the car industry in this country is over. It genuinely is going to be game over for the car industry. So he's looking at his job, also all his friends' jobs, and thinking, if we don't do something, our jobs are going to be over and our livelihoods are going to be changed. But he can't get the people that he works with to understand that. And if we don't do a better job of communicating, these people are not going to change their minds. And even if we get that second vote, they're all going to turn out and vote exactly the same way they did last time. So that's the challenge. And there are 3 reasons, I think, why that is. So I'll just take you through those, and then we can move on to Q&A. So the first one is, I just think we talk about the wrong things. Most of the time, when you hear people on TV talking about Brexit, talking about the referendum, talking about why it's a bad thing, we talk about the customs union, we talk about the single market, we talk about trade deals, we talk about non-tariff barriers. For 99.9% of people in the country, they will hear those words and think, I don't know what any of those things are, and nor do I care. They sound like things that are completely irrelevant to me in my life. Now, we know that if we get those things wrong, it will cost jobs, businesses will close, industries will close, and prices will go up. But most people don't make those connections. We have to make those connections for people, primarily by stopping talking about customs unions and non-tariff barriers and starting talking about jobs, the NHS access, prices going up. And the best thing we could do with that is not do that on a national level, but actually localise that. How many jobs are going to go in Middlesbrough? I don't know, but we should find out, and we should tell people in Middlesbrough. How many industries are going to go? Again, I don't know, but we should find out and give people that granular data that makes them connect Brexit to something in their life that matters to them. The second reason is that we use the wrong messengers. There are lots of people, too many people, who look and sound like me. And that's genuinely a problem. We should have more women talking about Brexit, more older people, more younger people, more people with regional accents speaking in their regions about Brexit and saying, why does this matter? On the local news programme, on breakfast television. It's so important. And I think there are people like that around. I meet lots of people who are great communicators, but we don't give them the space. And I don't actually know how to fix that. I'm not running the BBC or ITV or Sky. And I think often those people just go to the same people all the time. But actually part of it is our responsibility. People who do have some of that access, like me and like these guys on the panel, some of the time we should be saying, don't interview me, interview this great guy I met last week, or interview this person that I met last week, and get different voices and different names out there. Thirdly, we need to talk about immigration. I speak to a lot of people about Brexit, and not everybody, but there's a section of the population who, when I talk about the NHS, or when I talk about jobs, or I talk about the economy, they may not use this language, but essentially their response is, yes, but what about immigration? That's what people care about. And they care about it because they think that immigration is the problem. And we haven't won that battle. People still think that migrants are cutting wages, are taking jobs, are reducing their access to the NHS, are stopping their kids get a home to live in. None of those things are true, but we haven't actually challenged those successfully. What we need to do is point people away from blaming migrants and point people towards the real culprit, which is a failure of government policy over certainly all my lifetime. We haven't built enough houses. We haven't invested in northern communities. We haven't invested in left-behind communities. And part of that, and I'm a Labour Party guy, part of that is the Labour Party's fault. We should have done more when we were in government, and we should do more next time we're in government. But I would say the vast majority of that, and I would say this because I'm a Labour guy, is the Tories' fault. And certainly the last 8 years of austerity have done nothing to help explain to people why government cares about them or why government is interested in their lives. And we know that the EU has done more to invest in left-behind regions than Westminster governments for 30 years or more. But people don't understand that. Some of that is too complicated to explain. But what we can do is say, hey, the migrants aren't the problem. They're not the ones cutting your wages. It's your boss. And why is he doing it? Or why is she doing it? Well, actually, they're facing constraints themselves. Well, why is that? Well, that's because the government's rubbish. Maybe that's a complicated argument. Maybe that's an argument some of you don't want to have. But it's an argument that we need to have. Otherwise, they're going to keep blaming migrants, and the solution for them is to vote Brexit. There you go. Let's do Q&A.
Thank you very much, Mike. We'll now move to question and answer session. Could I please ask you to raise your hands? I'm hoping to take 3 questions at a time. In the middle.
Mike Reynolds from Sheffield. I think everyone in this room knows that if we're to get a people's vote, A, it has to be sanctioned, given to us, as it were, by Parliament, and that it will not happen unless the Labour Party supports the people's vote. Mike, you are Labour for people's vote. What are you going to do, and what are members of the Labour Party that support Remain and support the people's vote going to do to make sure that it comes about?
Thank you, Mike. Do we have any other questions? The lady at the front.
Two of them.
Thank you. Barbara Boyce, Labour councillor in York. You've just said that people in those factories still would vote out. I come from York. People think it's a fairly prosperous place. I had horrendous things said to me on the doorstep when I was campaigning. Awful racist things about we don't want them foreigners. There is still, the day after the referendum, I had casework people coming to me. I've been told to go back to where I come from people who's been working in our city for years. There is some pretty nasty stuff out there. I don't think that's going to go away. People did not vote on facts. They call that Project Fear. They did not vote on what's actually happened. They vote on feelings. And are those feelings going to go away if we have a people's vote? I'd like a government who actually said, we do not want people to commit economic suicide. We want to do what's best for our country. And to be honest, scrap it.
Thank you.
So my question is quite simple, I know this is a workshop on reaching the left behind. I work in a factory in Huddersfield where the phenomenon is very similar to what you described, the car factory. I used to live in Teesside. What I wanted to ask is the best strategy to try and reach the hard levers in the left behind section, or is it rather to try and shift the middle of the country by, say, 15 or 20% over into the Remain camp so that there's enough of a clear majority for us to stay in the European Union?
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So what are we doing to shift Labour? Well, I started Labour for People's Vote at the beginning of the year because I'm a Labour Party member and was looking at where Labour was and was thinking I didn't see things moving or didn't see them moving anytime soon anyway. And that's for a few reasons. First, well, the most important really is that people didn't have a means to speak out or a banner to rally behind, if you see what I mean. So polls at that time showed and still show that 70–80% of Labour Party members support Jeremy Corbyn, support the leadership, regardless of what you think of Jeremy Corbyn, that's the case, and also supported a second referendum and supported staying in the European Union. But those people had no means to evidence that fact. And in fact, they were inhibited from evidencing that fact by some of the other people in the Labour Party, people who were more, centrists like Chuck Ramona and Chris Leslie and people like that. Obviously, those people, I'm sure, are entirely well-intentioned, want to stop Brexit, but because they're seen as anti-Corbyn, they in effect prevented most Labour Party members from speaking out because they didn't want to be seen to side with the centrists, but they had no means to speak out and say, well, I'm pro-Corbyn, but I'm anti-Brexit. That's what I think and that's what I want. So essentially, we've created that space where people can say, I want a socialist government, I want a radical government, I want us to change the way the economy runs, but I also want to stop Brexit. And we've connected those things. And that's been really important, has given people space to join a campaign and to say, this is who I am and this is what I believe. So this campaign's happening across the country. We're trying to influence policy at Labour conference in a couple of weeks, and we've got arguments going out, and we've got articles, and we've got we've done a good job in terms of bringing people together. But I am also aware that we face an uphill battle, and I'm also aware that the Labour Party leadership are in a position where they're looking at the country, thinking we want to win a general election. Where's public opinion? What are people going to do in Labour seats? One fantastically welcome thing is that Labour voters are shifting more from Leave to Remain than any other. And that's the thing that is most likely to shift Labour opinion on this. As well as the fact that trade unions have started shifting, of course, to support a people's vote. And there are significant moves within Momentum as well to support a people's vote. In terms of what you guys can do, which is just as important, if you're a Labour Party member, get involved and make your position heard to the leadership, to your MP, to your councillors, to other Labour Party members. That's really important. If you're not, do all that you can do to encourage the Labour leadership to move. And that means supporting them and calling them out to be their best and to stand up for working people. And what it doesn't mean is attacking the leadership. Because if you do that, I mean, it's the same with anybody, any of us. People attack us personally. Do we then want to do what that person wants us to do? No, of course we don't. We then think, I don't like that person very much because they don't like me. I'm therefore against what they want. So attacking Jeremy Corbyn and attacking the leadership is utterly self-defeating if you want a people's vote on the Brexit deal.
Thank you, Mike.
There is a lot of feeling regarding this, and one of the feelings that we were made to feel is we were made to feel powerless. I mean, it's one of the reasons why they tried to make it seem like the EU was this dictatorship, because not only does that mean this is a thing that we want to go against, but it also means that if the EU controls everything, that means everything that's bad must be the fault of the EU. And so one of the main things you have to do is point out just how much control we have. And that goes to, I mean, take immigration. One of the reasons why I'm sat here is because I got Nigel Farage to admit that his lie about immigration, saying that there is nothing we can do to stop unlimited numbers of people from EU countries coming to this country and enjoying the same rights and privileges as all the rest of us. Lie. Article 7, Citizens' Rights Directive. In order to come here without a job, you have to have sufficient resources not to become a burden and have comprehensive medical insurance, which means it is a complete lie to suggest the EU forces us to let migrants come here, live off benefits, and clog up the NHS. If you point out, because there are some people who are whose minds are never going to change regarding immigration, so you have to reach them as well and point out, no, we have control over this issue. If you want to see it as bad, fine, but we have control over this. Same thing goes with refugees. There was this narrative, you remember Nigel Farage with this breaking point poster with all the refugees coming in? We're not part of the common asylum policy. Not one refugee enters this country, not one person from outside of the EU enters this country without the UK saying so. We have complete control over that. But then you've got to ask, obviously regarding immigration, again, this is something I pointed out to Nigel Farage. I seem to talk to him a bit too much than I'd like to. EU citizens make up 5% of the population, yet they make up 10% of our doctors. So rather than EU immigration being something that threatens the country, it's literally keeping us alive. So the point is we need to change the narrative regarding immigration, because right now, EU citizens from other EU countries are a net benefit to our economy. Now, if people at the bottom are struggling, that's not an issue of something that's actually causing a benefit. If that benefit isn't reaching the people that are also at the bottom, that's a problem of the system. That means that you're not taxing the people at the top to make sure that people at the bottom are actually okay. It's an inequality in this country that is leading to that problem. And regarding control, you make the point that you have to find common ground with people who voted for Brexit. If we treat them like they want to destroy the country, like they have these completely incompatible views, we will never move anywhere. They wanted more control. They wanted to have control over their country. That is a completely legitimate aim that we should all identify with. But the point is, that aim gets screwed by Brexit. Right now, we have 73 of the 750 MEPs in the European Parliament. That means we have 10% despite being one of 28 countries. That means we have 3 times the voting weight of the average EU country. We are one of the most powerful countries in Europe deciding our laws. And because of just basic laws of economy, it will always be in our economic interest to have similar laws to our biggest, closest, and cheapest market. So that's why what Theresa May is pursuing right now is a situation where we copy the laws of the EU but have no say in those laws. That leaves us as one of the least sovereign countries in the whole of Europe. That's not what Brexit voters wanted at all. So speak to their need for sovereignty. Speak to their need for control. Point out that Brexit is stealing both.
Thank you very much, Femi. Jude, I'm mindful of the time, so could I please ask you to make a quick reply?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'd like to come back on the question of feelings because I think I thought the official Remain campaign was the worst campaign that I've ever been involved in. It was appalling, it went badly on the doorstep, and it was awful. And I'll give you one concrete example of it. George Osborne coming out and saying that people would be £4,000 worse off if we voted to leave. When we knocked on doors in East Middlesbrough, in Grangetown, in some of the most deprived wards in Europe, in Europe and in the UK actually, when we knocked on those doors, people said, I haven't got £4 spare. I'm not going to lose £4,000. Somebody else might lose £4,000, but I've got nothing to lose. And by using that kind of campaign material around how much you were going to lose in quantified figures, you gave people the ammunition to say, I've got nothing to lose in this vote and I can vote as painlessly to vote to leave. We have to have a campaign which is heart as well as head. If we only have a campaign which is your head, the statistics, the single market, the customs union, the jobs in Middlesbrough, or the impact on our regional economy, we will lose all over again. But if we tell stories about your community, we tell stories about people that you know, then you start to win people over. Stories like the fact that in the northeast at Newcastle Hospitals, which is a cancer centre for the whole of the north of England, particularly for paediatric cancers, we have now lost the top paediatric urologists who were German and felt unwelcome after the Brexit vote. They left and they were immediately headhunted by the Netherlands and they went. But that story was raised to me before it hit the regional press by mums in a women's group in Middlesbrough whose children had long-term terminal illnesses, and that was their consultant. And they were horrified that because of Brexit, their child's doctor, who they loved, was leaving. We have to tell those stories, the human impact of Brexit, the human impact of working with our neighbours, the human impact of the relationships that we've built over 40 years, not the economic impact, but the impact on you, your life and your community. And if we fail to do that, then we will fail to win over those car workers. Very quick, it links to the question, do we go for the hard Brexiters or the middle ground? There are 15% of the population, more or less, who are absolutely militantly pro-European. The European Union could be an army marching down the road and they would be pro-European. There are 15% of the population who are militantly anti-European, will never be converted. The vast majority of people are in the middle. And I think there is a shift from Leave to Remain, but what we have to be very careful about is the shift from Remain to Leave, because increasingly people are bored. They're really fatigued by the fact that Brexit is taking all of the oxygen out of our political debate, that nothing else is being dealt with. And increasingly what we hear from people who voted Remain because they thought it was the best option on the day is we've just got to get on with it. If it's going to happen, let's just do it. And if Theresa May brings back a deal in November, December, there will be an immense pressure on MPs in this region and across the whole of the North representing Leave seats to vote for a deal rather than to drag the whole story on further. So we need an answer to that. And we need to demonstrate that actually it's worth getting the right solution for the country, the best interest of the country, for all of the reasons, head and heart, rather than just trying to get the whole story wrapped up as quickly, which a lot of people want now to happen.
Thank you, Jude.
Can I just make a quick
I'm really sorry, but we've run out of time in terms of questions. I'm just going to let Femi and Mike just say one final word each.
Just regarding feelings, we have to point out the main feeling we need to be going for and we need to add to this debate is hope. Because quite simply, if you keep talking about this is what Brexit takes from you, people who already feel like they have nothing aren't going to respond, just like Jude was saying. The point is, things need to get better, and for that to happen, we need time, money, resources, and the government needs to actually focus on those things. And as she was saying, Brexit is taking all the oxygen out of the room. So if you actually want things to get better, Brexit needs to step out of the way.
Thank you, Femi. Mike?
Just one quick thing on whether we go for hard levers or people who are sort of more in the middle. In the end, we want to win, so we have to spend most of our time and effort on people who might change their minds. And as Jude was saying, there's about 15% of the population that are never going to change their mind, pretty much. So for now, we need to acknowledge that, try not to speak to them, and try to speak to people who are worried about Brexit and actually might change their opinion. One other thing on campaigning is, and this is true, I think, for most of the different Remain campaigns, and I've worked in lots and lots of different campaigns over the years, one of the things we don't do is do enough nuancing of our messaging and try and work out, well, who are we trying to appeal to, and what's their opinion? We put out blanket messaging to the whole country instead of thinking, right, well, let's do some research and see what middle-aged women think. You know, maybe they're concerned about their kids' futures. Maybe they're concerned about the NHS. Maybe they're concerned about their kids getting a house. And then speak on those issues to those people. And you can target that messaging. So often our enemies are better at doing that kind of thing than we are. We need to put more time, effort, and yes, money into actually doing the research we need to do to understand who we're speaking to, what their opinion is now, and what messaging is going to influence them to essentially think what we think. And that isn't being Machiavellian at all. That's just good campaigning skills. And too often we let our enemies be better at that than we are. Finally, there's a Left Against Brexit event next Friday evening. I'm not sure of the venue, but if you're interested, come and speak to me. Oh, it's here. Great. Come here on Friday night if you are on the left and you want to talk about Brexit, and it's going to be great.
Thank you very much. Could you please put your hands together and thank the panellists, Femi, Mike and Jude.